Thursday, the 6th of February. Thanks for joining us on Hooked on Sport. I'm Wallace Long. In this episode, we'll hear what's caught Hooky's eye this week in sport, including his local SA Sports Wrap. We'll also be catching up with James Harris from Softball SA to hear about their exciting win in the Women's Open National Championship. G'day, Hooky.
Hey, Wallace, mate. What an amazing week of sport. And we've got so much coming up as well. Live Golf is on our doorstep. I'm so excited. Sheffield Shield's about to restart. I'm sure we'll be talking cricket next week. But how are you?
Oh, mate, I'm very well indeed. Thank you. Looking forward to a bit of break from the heat, but yeah, well indeed.
I'm a sicko for heat. Bring it on. Give me 40 degrees all year round, I reckon.
Well, fringe is starting, so the heat will be up.
Isn't it a great time of year? That sort of early March in Adelaide when there is just so much happening. I love it. I'm not a big show goer, but I just love sort of wandering around the streets and seeing people just piling in from the suburbs into the city, and in particular that eastern side. I reckon it's amazing.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I think, long days, which is really good. Get up early, have a run. We'll get to that later. And we'll catch up and see how you're going. But just on, it has been, you said it's been a great week in sport. It's been a great week in SA sport. You know, we've got Travis Head winning the Allan Border Medal, Michael Bevan, who started his career in South Australia, inducted into the Australian Cricket Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And South Australian cricket flying at the moment. The South Australian women's team didn't have a great week. They lost both of their matches to the Queensland Fire, a little bit under strength, the South Australian team at the moment. But what an amazing story. Travis Head, kid from Gawler, was a bit of a child prodigy, had been through some up and downs in his time with South Australia, and also with Australia has been dropped a couple of times. One time, certainly at the start of the Indian series 2 years ago, inexplicably so. But yeah, the first ever South Australian to win the Allan Border Medal. It is quite incredible. I'm just so proud of him and just what he stands for in the game. Michael Bevan is an amazing story, Wallace. As you said, he began his career with South Australia that not many people know. People mostly identify him as a New South Wales cricketer, but yeah, played for South Australia when he was picked sort of from obscurity, really, when he came over to South Australia with the Cricket Academy. He was a fast bowler, but he had so many back problems. He became a batter who could bowl leg spin, and yeah, was the prototype one-day player. I've got an amazing story to tell you about him, but I want to play you some audio first. This came from an interview that he did on 5AA on Monday. It's him talking about his favourite ever innings. Take a listen to this.
One of the innings that I was extremely proud of and happy with was innings at the MCG. I think it was in 2001, 2002. We were struggling to make the finals, and we needed to win that match. And from memory, New Zealand got 250, and we were 6 for 48 or something like that. And so it was a nice long innings under pressure, and I managed to rattle off 100 or close to, I think. And so, that was an innings that stuck in my mind, and I really felt pretty proud about that one in terms of my contribution for the team.
So there you go, Wallace. That was January 29 of that year. I took my dad to see that game. We flew over from Adelaide to Melbourne. We stayed at the Hilton Hotel just across the road from the MCG. Jason Gillespie, still a good friend of mine, was a very good friend of mine then, a club mate. He organised me tickets into the members. We got there about an hour and a half before the game started. I was just starting to consider getting into coaching at this point. So we had these amazing seats right down the pitch, high up in the members. It was a beautiful day. It was warm, but there was this beautiful cooling breeze coming from the south and blowing into our face, which kept us nice and refreshed. New Zealand batted first. They got about 250, and the evening turned. It got a bit cooler. I ran back to the Hilton, got the little jumpers that we had to try and stay warm. Australia were in all sorts of trouble. I think he said it's 6 for 46 in that clip. I don't think that was right, but I do remember we were halfway through the Australian innings. They were 6 for 94 at the 25 over mark. And by this stage, Wallace, it had got freezing. We were sitting with a friend of my father's, Bob Borman, who said, boys, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty cold. If you want to stay and watch the cricket, that's fine. But if you don't, if you're ready to go, looks like Australia's done, why don't we nip into Chinatown and we'll grab a nice evening feed and make a bit of a night of it. We've been at the cricket 7.5, 8 hours. It was freezing cold. It was unpleasant. Yeah, come on, let's go. So we walk out of the ground, get a cab into Chinatown. Bob knew exactly where to go. We had this amazing experience. Chinese was just beautiful. 90 minutes later, we go back out of the restaurant. There's a cab. Just take us back to the Hilton Hotel in front of the MCG there, please, driver. He says, that's no good. He said, we'll never get in there. The cricket's just finished. And I said, what's happened? Did Australia bat out the overs? He said, no, they've won. What are you talking about? They were 6 for 94 chasing 245. He's going, yeah, it's one of the most amazing performances from an Australian team. Got in the cab. We could not get back within about 500 metres of the Hilton Hotel because of the streams of people walking out of the MCG and back into town. And so we got out of the cab, started walking against the flow of the people, and there was a girl who was all excited. And I said to her, did Australia really win? This is before the days when you could just check this stuff on your phone. She said, yeah, it's the most amazing game I've ever seen in my life. And so I'm getting text messages from Jason Gillespie. Can you believe the tickets that I organised for you? What an amazing experience that must have been for you. And all I could reply was, yeah, Jason, absolutely amazing. Never seen a better game. Well, I never saw the game. I never saw the finish when Michael Bevan and Andy Bickle from nowhere conjured this incredible victory. So, yeah, always stay to the end is a good lesson to learn out of that one, Wallace. Because
100%.
We snuck away early and missed a lot.
Did you see any of Michael Bevan's batting?
Well, he was in at the time. So he came in at number 6 and Australia was 6 down when we left. So I reckon he was batting with Shane Warne, and Warne made about 20-odd, got out. Brett Lee made about 30-odd and got out. And then I reckon it was Andy Bicker with Australia. It must have been 8 out. And I think he scored 15 off about 7 or 8 balls, and Australia won with 3 balls to spare. So, yeah, I actually also didn't attend the last day of the amazing Adelaide Test about 4 years later when Australia came from nowhere to win on the last day. So maybe it's the best thing for Australia if I have tickets and don't turn up, because they seem to win from nowhere.
Hey, while we're talking cricket, I see there was an article in the paper this week by Crash Craddock, maybe suggesting Travis Head should never be captain of Australia. What are your thoughts?
It caught my eye, Wallace. Well done pointing this out. This was an opinion piece from Crash. It wasn't necessarily a news piece, but it certainly came from a position of authority that there are genuine questions about whether Travis Head is a right fit to be the captain of the Australian Test team. And I think that would be a gross misassumption on the maturity of Travis Head and of Australian cricket itself. Head is demonstrably qualified. He's smart. He's assertive. He knows the roles of an Australian cricket team, and he has even promoted the concept that we should be more flexible with the way that Australia should play its Test cricket. Now, I accept he's not an accomplished public speaker like Patrick Cummins obviously is, but those skills will develop, and that should not be a disqualifier either. He's captained South Australia, and it never curtailed his spirit in all of the period that he did it. He's not captaining the team anymore, but that's only because he's routinely unavailable. He has an exemplary behavioural record, and I think he would make an ideal fit as captain of the Australian cricket team. I am always a little bit irked by this. I just reckon if he came from New South Wales or Victoria, there would never be any sense that he shouldn't be the captain of the Australian cricket team. But we always just put a bit of a quirky spin on South Australians. I think that would be a terrible mistake to overlook Travis Head as the next captain of the Australian cricket team. I certainly hope that's not the case by the powers that be, and that's just Crash, I guess, having a bit of a thought bubble in his own mind, and maybe this is something that the Australians consider. But I expect certainly in the next 24 months that Travis Head becomes the 48th captain of the Australian Test team. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd encourage you to take a listen to Beyond the Club. It's a project I've been working on with Flinders University. Now I co-host it with Professor Sam Elliott, and we break down all the latest research on how to maximise the experience of junior and club athletes. There's a range of resources, special guests, and cutting-edge info on how you can make your club a safer, happier place for your kids and their club mates. Beyond the Club, wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, Live Golf is starting in Saudi this week ahead of Live Adelaide.
Yeah, you're right. It's going to be interesting because traditionally what has happened with Live Golf here in Adelaide is there's been at least a week off beforehand. So the players arrive it's generally coincided with Gather Round. I don't know if you've noticed, but you always see pictures at Gather Round of live golfers sitting in corporate boxes watching Australian rules football the week before. Well, this is very different now. They're going to be playing, it starts tomorrow at the Riyadh Golf Club. It's going to be played under the lights, which is really interesting as well. So that will allow it to go a little bit more into prime time into the American market. That will be really interesting to see how a nighttime golf tournament goes. So it's good to see Liv, I guess, trying to experiment and just adding a different factor to it. We're going to see some interesting things, I think, here in Adelaide. Firstly, I've got on watch Phil Mickelson has a shoulder injury, and that will be really disappointing if he doesn't come up fit for Live Adelaide. He said he will be fit for it. He's going to miss the Saudi Arabian tournament, but he should be fit for Adelaide. They've brought in Ollie Schneiderjans as his replacement, who's a story in his own right. I won't go into too much detail there, but he is amazing that he's suddenly all of a sudden representing a Live franchise. So, yeah, I think the one thing we've got to think about with Liv is what is next. It's our third year. Granger signed on for 4, but what's next, Wallace? So are we going to be the long-term venue for Liv? I've probably talked about this with you before. I think the one challenge is that Grange, as great as a golf course as it is, it does lack a little bit of drama. It lacks a bit of theatre for professional golf. So if you think about the great tournament golf venues, you're talking about Augusta National, you're talking about TPC Sawgrass, Pebble Beach, Le Golf National, which even hosts the Olympics. So these are places where scoring swings can be quite extreme. There's a lot of water hazards around the place, and that's something that Grange, with its current configuration, out of its 36 holes, it uses all 18. Really, there's no water involved at all. So, yeah, there's some long-term thinking to be done about is if Grange doesn't want to put its hand long-term, and I would completely understand that, where can we take this event in South Australia to make it the long-term home of Liv? Because I would love that to be the case, but I just don't know where else it goes right now. But I can't wait. It's going to be an amazing event. Weather looks like it's going to be perfect. We should see some wind up as well, which we haven't seen at Liv in the past couple of years, which does just add to the test. We've probably got some moderate winds, and we've had really, really calm weather in April in the past. So now in February, a bit more wind around in the afternoon should be good fun.
Now, the NBA mid-season trade periods happened. And would that type of trade period mid-season work in the AFL?
Did you see, Wallace, Luka Doncic was traded from...
I certainly did. I couldn't have missed it.
From the Dallas Mavericks to Los Angeles. I mean, this has just had people with heart palpitations over in the US. They said that they wanted to improve their defense, and I think they conceded 45 points in the first quarter they played without him. I'm really uncomfortable with the concept that we should have a mid-season trade period in the AFL. And the only reason is this, Wallace. There are some players in AFL football who maybe earn $200,000 to $250,000 a year. And that sounds like a lot of money for the average wage earner here in Australia. But if you got told with a day's notice that you've got to uproot yourself, your family, your kids out of a school and move them across interstate, and this is all supposed to happen in 36 hours, I think that would be unfortunate. So if there was going to be a trade period in AFL football, I think it should probably come with a caveat that you need to be on a minimum pay wage. I would be quite comfortable seeing that on that basis, that it's someone who's eminently well remunerated to be able to be moving state at a short period of time, because it would certainly create a lot of interest and it would create some incredibly wild trading. So if you imagine, Wallace, and you're a Sydney Swan supporter, that Sydney's third at the halfway point of the year, but they desperately need to get in a ruckman if they're going to be competitive in a final series. The amount of draft picks that you would throw at that sort of a problem at that point in the year, I think would be really beneficial to the club like a North Melbourne, who's happy to sell off a top quality ruckman, knowing that it might be worth 3 or 4 players to them in the next couple of years. So I'd like to see it, but I am uncomfortable with the concept that it's going to maybe come at the expense of someone who might only be on $150,000 a year and has to uproot his whole life with maybe 48 hours notice.
So what we've seen in professional sport over the last several years has been change. How many professional sports do you know have mid-season trade periods?
Well, it's really a fixture. You see it a lot. I mean, it's certainly a fixture of US sport, but you see transfer windows in European football right throughout all of those leagues as well. There's an international transfer window. So, Look, this is not unusual. It is really unusual in Australian sport. We've always been very uncomfortable with it. And I do feel like the AFL, that was all set, they have got in their collective bargaining agreement a deal that says that they can trigger this in conjunction with the AFL Players Association at any time. That came in last year. They didn't use it. It doesn't look like they're going to use it again this year. So maybe they've gone a little bit cold on it. But yeah, the NBA breaking into the market basically in the week of the bye ahead of the Super Bowl, I think is pretty incredible. So it certainly has some power to drive traffic and attention away from other sports. And that's always been what the AFL has done very, very well.
Now, the Super Bowl's on Monday. The two teams have played 19 and 20 games respectively to make it to the Super Bowl. Last year, Sydney played 25 and Brisbane 26 to make the AFL Grand Final. Are there too many games in AFL?
Oh, yeah, good question. It's at a pinch point now, isn't it, Wallace? I'm really interested in the fact that all of these teams, in particular the teams that went deep in the second half of last year, they really only have about a 17, 18 week turnaround before they're back into match sim after playing a grand final the year before. And if you look at the injury list at the moment, you're already seeing some real injury challenges that are confronting some clubs. And I mean, I don't know if this is just me, but I seem to have noticed a lot of long-term hamstring injuries, guys that are going to miss 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks with a hamstring injury. So I feel like we're right on the cusp of what you can do to an elite athlete now if you're expecting them to be up and running for 30 to 32 weeks of the year. It is very, very different to the NFL where they play, as you said, 17-game minor round season, 2 or 3 finals, have a week off into a Super Bowl. And all of those players really only play half of the time. So you have a defensive unit and you have an offensive unit. And you don't have guys that are on the field 70, 75, 80, 85% of the time like you do in AFL football. So, yeah, if we want to grow revenue from here, we can't keep asking the players to play more games. I think what we do need to look at is what the NFL is doing, and it looks like they're going to move more games internationally. So we don't do that at all at the moment. Port Adelaide famously did it with China. St Kilda moved a game to New Zealand, but the NFL is going to play 8 games outside of the US from 2026 onwards, including what looks to be like a 3-year deal to play a match at the MCG. And in October 2026, it seems for everything, the announcement isn't official yet, but we're going to see the LA Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles play here. And the drive is wholly and solely on the basis that they can see that's the way that they can grow their revenue is by increasing their international market. So I think right now we're probably gone too far with AFL games, and maybe we need to see how we can invest in getting some of those games back into the US. I mean, I'm fascinated that we've got, of the 32 NFL franchises, we've got 5 Australian punters. Of all of the college teams, I think there's 61 college punters. Why aren't we playing some Australian rules football for premiership points in the US? I mean, the NRL is doing it. They've got that series in Las Vegas, and that's something that's something that I would see Australia and the Australian Football League moving towards over and above just this constant expansion of its own television rights deal by playing more and more games.
Okay, Hooky, time to move on to your local sports wrap.
Right, yeah, so a couple of really cool stories that have come across my desk this week. First and foremost, Izzy Bat-Doyle has run an Australian record for the half marathon. She's done it in quite incredible circumstances. She's run a 67:17. So we were talking about Tara Palm last week running 70 minutes. She's run it in 67:17. That's 30 seconds off the previous record that was set in 2000 by Karen McCann, I think it was. So this was over there in Japan. So congratulations to Izzy Bat-Doyle. It is another record, and she is just heading towards an Olympic marathon in 2028, you would probably suggest. Want to touch on local cricket. Beth Worthley has made 127 out of 170 to lead Sturt to the Women's T20 title. That was on Sunday afternoon at Adelaide Oval. I went and had a look through. That would have won. Her score alone would have been enough to win the last 16 women's T20 titles. 127 won all 16 of them, and she scored that on her own. So that's quite an incredible record. Talking about big scores, Chad Sayers won Test match for Australia straight after Sandpaper Gate. playing B1 for Grange. Don't know how he found himself in the B1s. He's got to miss the second week or something like that. But he scored 267 not out on the weekend as Grange made 507, I think they made. He was in a partnership with Lee Harding of 380. Chad's 267 not out came from 197 balls with 2 sixes and 34s. So I feel a bit sorry for the Mawson Lakes players that he had to take on the weekend. And just one to wrap up, we talked about the Camden Classic last week.
Yep.
I think I might have mentioned Hayden Roth, who'd been to the final 7 times and never won it. I think he'd been a runner-up 3 times. He's coached by Frank McHugh, who has won it in the past. Well, poor old Hayden was runner-up yet again. Oh. So he's been in the final now 8 times, runner-up 4 times, and never won it, the poor bloke. So I tell you what, this time next year, we are going to be doing everything we possibly can to wish Hayden Roth all the best of luck. The great story out of the Camden Classic, though, Casey Allen won the 400-metre race for women over 30, and that came about an hour after Tully Allen, her daughter, had won the 400-metre race for women for girls under 18.
Wonderful.
So I think one of the first times ever that a mother and daughter have won on the same day. What a cool story that is.
Great story. That's local sport, isn't it? Great job, Hooky. After this short break, we'll be joined by James Harris from Softball SA. And a big shout out to Softball SA's sponsors, Arkabar Hotel, Spacequake Sports, Evrite, MC Sportswear, and Eastern. The state's women's open softball team, known as the SA Stars, have just won the national championships, the Gilley Shield. Joining us to discuss this thrilling win and all things softball is Softball SA State Operations Manager, James Harris. James, welcome.
Wallace. Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
James, a wonderful championship win by the SA Stars.
Yeah, unreal. I choke up when I start talking about it. It's a second time in 4 years, an emotional win in 2022, and this year it felt dominant.
James, a thriller as well in the final against Queensland. Just take us through that final innings and Millie Fidge's heroics.
It's a great story, isn't it? Player of the final in 2022 as a pitcher. Millie Fidge comes in as what we call a designated player. Baseball would know as a designated hitter. A little bit more flexibility in our sport. So with bat in hand this time rather than ball in hand, she hits the ball 225 feet, hits the fence on the full. You know, I'm out of my chair on the couch watching the live stream, willing it to go over for the win. She gets to second base, scores on Olivia Elliott's hit, and she plays a crucial moment. She was in the final play in 2022. She fielded a ground ball for the win and then crosses the plate for the winning run in 2025. It was something to watch. I'll watch it over and over again if I can.
James, you just said it's our second win in 4 years. It would sound like, therefore, that this is a fairly regular occurrence for South Australian softball. But am I right that this is only our third win in history, and you've got to go back to about the 1950s for the other one?
Yeah, 1956 we won at Thebarton Oval here in Adelaide, and then 66 years later we won it here in 2022 as hosts, and then 4 years later in Melbourne we've done it again. Regular occurrence, 2019 runner-up, 2020 runner-up. 2021, of course, was cancelled for COVID purposes and reasons. And then we won it in 2022, third the last 2 years. And to be back on top, it's a good feeling.
James, I have to be honest, I didn't see this coming. It looked like a squad of very few big names. You might talk to us about Lexi Kilfoyle in a moment, who would be unheard of, I guess, outside of the hardcore softball community. But it looked like a squad without necessarily a lot of star factor. Just describe what this group was like and how they managed to conjure this incredible victory together.
An incredible group, actually. Missing some stars. 9 capped South Australians are currently out there that are still involved in the sport, capped Australian players for the Aussie Spirit. Some maybe in the early years of retirement, a couple of pregnancies, and then some international that are based in US colleges that were unavailable. So we only took 1 capped Australian player away in this team. which was Maddie Scott, who is also an interesting story, a son of daughter of a star baseball player. Andrew Scott went away to college and debuted for the Aussie Spirit before she debuted for her own Stars Open women's team. And then some of our college players that were available in Abby Jorgensen, as well as the Fidge sisters, Millie and Ruby, but then some local talent. We had to borrow a couple of players from interstate. Paige Smith's going to have a story to tell. Her state, Western Australia, finished bottom, and she was a reject for them and now a national champion. And then you add in some of our local internationals that are brought in by our local clubs to play in our Softball SA Premier League and make themselves available for to play national championships for our state team. Reagan Diaz, Brian Marcelino, and Neely Peterson, all playing locally. Two of those are in their second year of being here. We're a destination state for these international players. We've got over a dozen of them playing in our Premier League this year, all wanting to extend their softball experience. We don't pay for them whatsoever. In fact, every person in that background photo paid their own way to be there. And Lexi Kilfoyle was our gun for hire, so to speak. She was a flying player out of Oklahoma State and a recent number 1 draft pick in the US Pro League.
Just describe for us how you come across these players, because it looks like our club competition, the Softball SA Premier League, does very well at finding these players. Is that driven by Softball SA, or are the clubs the ones who get on the front foot finding these players?
That's a good question. Some are registered on an online overseas players looking for a place to play. Others come through contacts. The likes of Steph Trzynski, another capped Australian player who wasn't available for this tournament through injury, had a great college career. And so through the college careers that we've had players go to and come back from, Mel McGee's and Tracy Mosley's of the past, and now you Steph Trzynski's, Annalie Dolmans, have got these connections to bring people to Adelaide to play. Like I said, destination state for these players, because there's nowhere for them to play in the month through October through to March. And so that they're looking for a place to play, and New Zealand's probably the only other place. And for women's softball, Australia's the place to go. Perhaps for men's softball, it could be either Australia or New Zealand. But yeah, the college recruitment process then also gets us a little bit more contacts as well. And so we're happy with our current arrangement.
James, you talked about Lexi Kilfoyle. You mentioned her number 1 draft pick in the Pro League over in the US. She was pitcher of the tournament. She was the MVP in the grand final. Just give a bit of an overview of the difference she made, not just so much as a player, but just adding some experience and some smarts around the group.
Yeah, she brought some professionalism to the team from all accounts, as well as just being there and in the moment. And each game, she always looked like she finished stronger than she started as well, including in the grand final. I said to Wallace before, I was watching the grand final with my wife, and I said in around about the halfway mark, I said, she's getting stronger. We score the next run, we're going to win this. We did, and we did win. And you could tell the way that she was dominant in the back half of games. She was great at the start of games, but she was dominant in the back half. And you can see in the poster behind me, she towers over everyone, including Ben Lucas, our coach. A young male coach in this sport is rare to see, and the guy's a talent. When it comes to coaching, he's never afraid to take risks, etc. And Ben and his coaching staff did so well to manage Lexi throughout the entire tournament. They had to play a lot of games. There was heat, there was rain, and a lot of delays as well. That's another story for the grand final legacy. But they managed her really well.
James, you mentioned Maddie Scott, daughter of Andrew Scott, legend of Australian baseball. Of course, Ruby and Millie Fidge, their father Darren, still going strong, playing for Goodwood. I see as having a profound effect in the local competition there. But their mum was a talented softballer in her own right. Talk a bit about the entire Fidge family.
Softball SA royalty. Annie Fidge won a national championship as a coach in 2006, had the likes of Vanessa Stokes and Belinda White in that team, so spoiled for talent that year, and really did start the turnaround for the Stars program, probably 2008, 9, 10, maybe around that era there. Didn't have the same success with the Open Women's team that she did with the under-19 team, but through those programs and successes, her and she has a little group, Janelle Barrett, one of them, who's the national chair of selectors for Softball Australia now, developed a great program that got them national selection. So Annie Fidge is a Hall of Famer, mostly for her coaching, but was a reasonable state player as well. And then her sister Karen Dale was an outstanding player in her own right as well. Now a junior coach.
Over 1,000 games for Walkerville.
And still going.
Yep.
And coached our under-18s this year as well to a third place finish, which was pretty respectable going by where we thought we were at. And then, of course, Darren, one of the guys from the baseball office that we share an office with, joked that he'll play till he's 90, which is only just around the corner. No, a kid. He played in our All-Star game with you, Ben, I should say, in October. So I think he still has a love for that softball game as well as baseball. But the two girls, both in US colleges at the moment, one in California, the other one in Hawaii, massive softball futures ahead of them.
James, you mentioned the coach, Ben Lucas. What has happened over the last several years for the Stars program for you to be so successful?
Well, having Ben come along was a new breath of fresh air for the group. Full credit where it's due to Bill Benedictson, who was the coach in 2022. He moved on and Ben came in. It was fantastic, firstly, for Ben to put his hand up. A young male coach in an open women's team may normally have been a little bit hesitant, not knowing if he'd have the respect of the playing group or whatever, but he's coached Port Adelaide to their first club premiership in the Premier League a couple of years back. And in 3 grand finals in a row, they've lost the last 2, but he's been there. Ultra aggressive coach that likes to steal and hit and run and let the batters do the talking with their own bat, really backs them in a power running game. And he was very ably assisted by Justina Adams, who's the Sturt coach in the Premier League, who comes down from Port Pirie every week. So he had a great group behind him. I think Justina Adams and Nikita Platt, who was new to coaching in South Australia, I think originally from Mount Gambier, spent a bit of time in Western Australia before coming back this year, put a hand up to be part of the group, bang straight in. So they work really well together, and Ben's just got a huge softball future ahead of him if that's what he wants.
James, if we can touch on the local league very briefly, the Premier League competition for Softball SA. Walkerville at the top, Port Adelaide second. Seacombe looks like a side that hasn't necessarily had a lot of success in recent times, making a bit of a run, but the competition is really tight. There's only about 6 or 7 wins between top and bottom, which is unusual for a local club competition.
Yeah, absolutely. You always sort of see that, top 3 or 4 teams are set almost about now just after the mid-season break, run into finals, which is in March. But any team can still make the top 4, depending on results going their ways or not. You mentioned Seacombe. I think Walkerville has been the same the last couple of years in that they've missed out on finals, but are back up to the top. A lot of premiership success with Walkerville. Port Adelaide's probably the only team that is steady at the top. Minor premiers last year, like I said, three grand finals in a row. They probably still are the team to beat. Walkerville have strengthened their lineup in the summer break, bringing in an extra catcher, maybe to relieve some pressure for Chelsea Robinson, one of their leaders, ably assisted by their batting lineup that just keeps growing. A young Georgia Mason, who's played in the under-18 group, is coming on leaps and bounds this year. Sophie King, a crafty veteran, is one of the league leaders in batting averages as well. So Walkerville looking pretty good. You mentioned Seacombe. led by Diaz and Peterson, who were in the Stars National Championship lineup, exceptional players, with Whitney Shepherd, who they brought in maybe as a B-grade pitcher, took our under-23s all the way through to a grand final in December at National Championship. So she's been a handy acquisition as well.
Hey, James, very quickly, you mentioned Chelsea Robinson there, who has played for Australia, the Aussie Spirit. At Walkerville, did she take over the number of a bit of a club legend a few months ago? I seem to vaguely recall that story, and I'm sure you would be across it.
It's a great story. Linda Martin, who we've renamed the Shield over the last couple of seasons from the Advertiser Shield. The Advertiser used to support the competition, not so much in recent years, but on our 80th
I know that feeling,
season,
mate.
On our 80th season, our board director, who is the chair of the Adelaide Club competition, he put a proposal forward, and it was unanimous that the Shield should be named after perhaps one of South Australia's greats. It should definitely be on our Mount Rushmore if you were to create one of legendary status in South Australia. Linda Martin is now the Shield's named after. She has returned to the sport. She's helping Carindale in our under-18s, and she also helps out at Walkerville again. The Shield's named after her, and Chelsea Robinson is the leader of that club. She returned from pregnancy, motherhood to return to the sport. And I think to her surprise, they offered her the number 8 that Linda Martin used to wear, and she took it. Normally would wear number 16.
That's an amazing story, James. The whole softball story is incredible. Congratulations to you all. I mean, we have sort of prided ourselves on what the Adelaide Thunderbirds have done in netball and the Adelaide Giants have done in baseball. And I do feel like the Gilley Shield victory a month back kind of snuck under the radar a little bit. And it's great for us to have the opportunity just to shine a bit of a beacon on it, because it is a remarkable achievement by a remarkable group. As you said, Lexi Guilfoyle aside, not a lot of stars amongst them. Stars I use advisedly, being the nickname of the team. But, mate, you must be so proud of where softball has come from and got to in this state in the last couple of years.
Yeah, 4 national titles before I started in the role of state operations manager. We've won 7 now, 1 in under 19 women and 2 in open women. We have a Great Dragons program for junior development. All our clubs and associations around the state are well aware we didn't do this on our own. The team didn't do it on their own. It's been the softball community that has really rallied together. There's been a lot of coaches come and go. There's been, for a while, a core group of players that took us from nothing up to contenders. And then, we've polished, whether it's the Premier League, and our live stream broadcasting through Spacequake Sports has also helped us create to be probably the number 1 domestic competition in the country. And, I'm super proud of that. The players are so proud to wear the tricolours, and we always push that with them at our state team induction day. We remind them every year that, you're not just playing for yourselves, your family, your club, your team, you're playing for your state. And we really are a pretty good community when it comes to representative softball and competitions, wanting to take it to the eastern states as well. But you mentioned the success of some of our other teams. There's no question about it that we're so proud of each of those sports. Giants missed out this year, but, back to back, it just adds to the number of championships out of this Diamond Sports facility here at West Beach that we've won in recent times. I think we're doing something right. We're getting things right on field, maybe a few things to tighten up off field, and maybe even a little bit of support from state government to go astray for a upgrade to our facility. And, you just never know. One thing I have noticed that Thunderbirds and the Giants have both had invites to sit in Parliament. I wouldn't mind that invite myself for our girls.
There you are. Well, I'm sure the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, and Sports Minister Katrine Hildyard are both regular listeners of ours, Wallace. So
we'll make sure they are. We'll make sure they are. They are after this.
Imminent.
Emily Burke, MLC, has taken over the Sport Minister portfolio just in the last week.
I should have recalled that. Yes,
beautiful.
Exactly right.
Have you already
There's
sent
been
her a letter?
Reshuffle.
Yeah, we've invited her to our CFS round, so not this Friday, next Friday at Nemba Park in the Hills. Emergency Services Minister and Sports Minister now, so it'd be a great fit to have Emily come. But I've got to say, Katrine, as the Minister for Sport, and even when she was Shadow Minister for Sport, has always supported softball. She loves coming down. She's been to a number of our events. You've hosted our events before, Ben, and she loves being involved at softball. It was an absolute credit to that position. One of the best sports ministers I've worked with.
I have to be honest with you, and I don't want to sort of carry on forever about politicians. But you're exactly right with Katrine. I mean, it's not unusual for a politician to think, well, if there's no TV cameras there, I don't really need to be there either. But she would turn up, not just for softball. I saw her at basketball events, racing events, cricket events, you name it. She was there. And it would have been just as easy for her to put in an apology or send someone else along and spend the night watching maths in her trackies. But no, she would be routinely at functions. I've got to give her a lot of credit. I'm sure Emily Burke will be just as good in that role. But yeah, she has been quite incredible in her time, Katrine. I commend her.
James, thanks so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure, guys.
Great show, Hooky. Now, just want to check in, see how the marathon training's going.
Yeah, well, Wallace, it's been really hot this week. I did a couple of very short sort of 5K runs on Saturday and Monday when it was really, really hot. I did 10Ks yesterday and I struggled. I'm having a day off today, but I've got my long run tomorrow, which will be 20K. So I'm averaging around about 40 to 45 a week. And I feel like even though the pace is down, that the kilometres in my legs are continually building slowly but surely. I've got a lot of confidence in myself. So tomorrow, I'm very, very confident that I'll be able to get through 20Ks. It'll be slow, but I've got the confidence in my body that I can get there. So I'm feeling really good at the moment, 6 months out from the big event.
Oh, that's brilliant. Great to hear. Okay, mate, all the best. You have a great week.
See you soon, Wallace.
Okay, cheers.